So we're going to stay in the Pac-12, right? Just because I feel like showing the Pac-12 some love on this episode. Don't sleep on Utah football, man. I think many people are overlooking the Utes this season. People are looking over Utah because USC, they hired Lincoln Riley, bring in all of these fantastic players from the transfer portal. So I can understand why some people have kind of forgot about Utah a little bit. But it's kind of disrespectful how people are overlooking the Utes. And it's funny because you remember last season, people were just so quick to crown Oregon the Pac-12 champions, right? And we thought that 2021 was finally going to be the year that the Ducks make it back into the college football playoffs. But guess who was that team who ruined that party for the Ducks? Utah. Not only did they dominate Oregon once, but they did it twice. In the regular season, in the Pac-12 championship game. And let me remind you, this was a team that didn't come out guns blazing. As a matter of fact, they started out 1-2. They had losses on the road to BYU and San Diego State. But after those minor setbacks, they made a quarterback change. I believe Charlie Brewer was the starting quarterback to start the year. And then you brought in Cam Rising. And then the rest was history. They went 9-1 after that 1-2 start before losing to the Buckeyes in the Rose Bowl 48-45 in one of the greatest college football games that I've seen in my lifetime. And I don't want to hear none from you old heads talking about something, man. You think that's one of the greatest college football games? Listen, I'm only 20. You get what I'm saying? So I'm not 40 or 50 years old, so I can't remember the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s or anything like that. So when I say of my lifetime, I'm not speaking for all time. You get what I'm saying? But look at the Utes, man. This team is better than USC. And I expect them to beat USC this year and win this conference. Because one thing about these Pac-12 teams that a lot of people fail to realize is that, yes, they look really good on paper, but anytime they face a team that's overly dominant in the trenches, they get pulverized. And Utah is that team. They were that team last year. They may not have had the big household names that Oregon had, but they had guys who were really phenomenal up front. And this is a team that doesn't do anything flashy. They're not going to beat you throwing the football 50, 40 times a game. They want to run the football down your throat, and they want to impose the will on you up front. You have running back Tavion Thomas, who was one of the best running backs in college football, in my opinion. He had 1,108 rushing yards on 204 attempts. 21 touchdowns, average 5.4 yards per carry. I'm really excited about him, man. I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing him go for almost 2,000 yards this year. Because TJ Pledger now is gone. He's in the NFL now. So I think Tavion Thomas could end up having a bigger workload. Your offensive line, without a doubt, is the best in the Pac-12. Not only is it the best in this conference, but it's also one of the best old lines in all of college football. Okay, you have a really good group of tight ends. You have Brent Keithy, who is one of the more athletic tight ends that we have in college football. I mean, this guy can move. This isn't your typical tight end. You don't really see tight ends who are this good after the catch that Brent Keithy is, but this is a really phenomenal tight end when it comes to making things happen after the catch. You also have Dalton Kencade. And these two tight ends made up the majority of the passing attack for the Utes last year. Keithy had 50 receptions for 611 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns. Kencade had 36 receptions, 510 yards, and 8 touchdowns as well. The wide receiver core is also pretty good as well, but they have a phenomenal defense. And remind you, this is a team that returned 17 starters from last year. I do have questions about who's going to be replacing linebacker Devin Lloyd and Sewell, but you do have defensive tackle Junior Tafuna, who ended up winning Pac-12 freshman Defensive Player of the Year. He is one of the best D tackles in the Pac-12. He had 4.5 sacks, 33 tackles last year. And it's funny that he won the award because you could make the argument and say that Cole Bishop also could have won that award as well because he stepped up big as a freshman in 2021. 54 tackles, 3 sacks, and 5 pass deflections. Also in the secondary, you have cornerback Clark Phillips, who is one of the best cornerbacks in college football going into this season. 13 pass deflections. He had 2 interceptions. You got safety Vontae Davis. So this is a really good defense, and you are going to have to figure out who's going to replace Sewell, Devin Lloyd. You don't know how great the linebacker play is going to be replacing those guys. You also did lose your leading pass rusher. But overall, man, this is a Utah team that I think too many people are expecting is just going to lay down and lose to USC like last year when people thought this was just Oregon's conference to lose and everybody seemingly counted out Utah. But you look at the struggles that USC currently has in their roster right now. Everybody looks at the addition of Williams, Mario Addison, and everybody that they added from the transfer portal, but the offensive line still is a huge question mark, and we don't really know how good their front seven is going to be also. So for Utah, with a team that takes personal pride in embarrassing teams that seem to be better than them in a sense, they take pride in not only beating them, but embarrassing them. If you go back and you watch that Oregon game, I was just saying, wow, man, they're beating this team twice. And not just beating them, but they're just physically imposing their will. They're just dominating Oregon. And it's one thing to beat a team, but the dominated team just running the football, ground and pound, that's just outright disrespectful, man. Just outright disrespectful. Not only that, but Kyle Whittingham, man, coming off one of the best seasons ever that he's been the head coach in Utah. He won Pac-12 Coach of the Year. I mean, the dude is phenomenal. And not too many people list him as one of the best coaches in college football. So if you're a Utah fan or a non-Utah fan and you're watching this video, you know, where do you rank Kyle Whittingham in terms of the college football coaching hierarchy? Do you consider him to be a top 20 coach, top 15, top 10 coach? I know he hasn't won a national championship or appeared in the college football playoff yet, but Utah has gotten really close over the year to breaking over that mold. And if there's going to be a Pac-12 team to get into the playoffs this year, my bet is going to be on Utah. Really, because when you look at some of the more successful Pac-12 teams over the last couple of years, they've all been really good up front. And it hasn't really been about who your quarterback is and how flashy of a skill position group you have. It's really been about which Pac-12 teams can handle themselves up front. And for Utah, that definitely is that team. On top of that, you know, they had a bunch of underclassmen last year who really stepped up and played major roles. So for this team to have the kind of season that they did last year was kind of remarkable. You're not going to see it too often. And going into 2022, man, I feel too many people are just quick to give this conference to USC like they was with Oregon. And we saw last year went, and I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing Utah smack USC the same way they did Oregon last year. Even though USC is a better program than what Oregon was last season, they are more talented. However, we don't know how good the Trojans are going to be on the line of scrimmage. And if you want to be able to beat this Utah team, you got to be able to hold up front. And I don't think USC is going to be able to do a good job of that this year. And when you look at Utah's schedule, it's not overly difficult. You're opening the season going on the road to Gainesville, Billy Napier's first ever game as a head coach for Florida, which is not going to be an easy game for Utah. You know, it could be a game that Utah wins by at least one possession, a field goal, or a late touchdown because it's week 1 of the college football season. You know, teams kind of come out a little bit rusty, and that is the best chance for upsets. The majority of upsets that occur in college football, they happen really early in the season because you still have teams that they're trying to get back into the flow of things. So that Florida game, week 1, do not overlook it. I wouldn't chalk it up as an automatic victory, even though I'm hoping that Utah ends up winning that game. I wouldn't be surprised if Florida won that matchup. Then you have to play UCLA, Oregon, Washington State on the road. You do have the luxury of being able to play USC and Stanford at home this year. So overall, this is a Utah football team, man, that, like I said earlier, they're my pick to win the Pac-12 this year. I think too many people are just so quick to ride on the USC hype train, and I understand why people are hopping on the Trojans hype train this year. And I'm not talking about the condoms neither. I think that for Utah, they're just so better up front than what USC right now is. I don't think that USC is going to be able to match the physicality that Utah brings, because Utah is a really physical football team, man. They really wear you down over the course of a game, man. And it's really hard to beat them, because once you get into the fourth quarter, they've already, tired you out so much that you're tired, you're kind of gassed. So not only do you have to be really good up front, but you also have to have really good depth up front as well. You have to be able to rotate guys in and keep guys fresh going into the fourth quarter, man, because even though Utah's offense isn't that unpredictable, you know that this is a team that wants to establish the ground game, and you understand what they want to do. But it's more demoralizing to know when something is coming and still not being able to stop it. That just shows you that team is just outright dominant, and they're outright better than you. And if any team is going to have a chance of being able to slow down Utah in this conference, you're going to have to be able to hold up front. So let me know how you guys are feeling about the Utes going into the 2022 college football season down in the comment section down below if you're watching this on YouTube.